Good morning. It's August 22nd. It's to my liberal friends. To debate or not to debate? And that's the question of this week. The first Republican debate is scheduled for tomorrow in Milwaukee. A slew of candidates have qualified for the debate, but there will be one podium that's obviously missing, and that would be the one that Donald Trump would have stood behind. But the former president has opted not to participate, and it forced you to wonder why he would skip this opportunity to talk directly to the voters. Donald Trump will instead send his son Donald Trump Jr. to be the media contact, and I'm sure that Don Jr. will have a lot to say about his father and what he's up to and why he decided to be a no-show. Donald Sr. will instead be sitting down with Tucker Carlson somewhere to be interviewed on some form of media outlet that Tucker has managed to procure. And this will allow Trump to avoid any tough questions and make as many outrageous statements as possible with no fear of being forced to defend them. Tucker Carlson thinks he's scoring a big coup by being able to interview Trump, but I think this will be less of an interview and more of a political show being produced by Trump. He will dominate the conversation, and you can be sure that Carlson will be the obedient little boy and not challenge him. After all, Carlson has to prove to Trump that he's giving his total fealty after some very damaging emails he sent where he disparaged the former president. It's becoming apparent that Trump will more than likely be the Republican nominee. He has a firm grip on a solid 35% of the primary voters, and therefore he sees no need to lower himself to communing with the rest of the voters, which to my way of thinking should show that once again Trump is all about Trump and nobody else. Just as he sat on a huge war chest during the midterm elections, money that might have helped the Republicans gain control of the Senate and put Joe Biden into a constant veto operation, he will once again mouth some platitudes about other Republican candidates, but unless it puts money in his political coffers, millions of which are being spent to pay his legal bills, or helps him in some way, he will remain on the sidelines. From my perspective, Trump has never understood what has happened in the last two presidential elections. In 2016, he ran against Hillary Clinton, and she had huge negatives surrounding her. She campaigned in a manner that suggested it was her turn, and everyone should realize that fact. I've often said the two most surprised people on election night in 2016 were Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. She'd been putting together a cabinet and staff for over a month, while Trump was caught flat-footed on the topic and had to scramble to put together his administration. Fast forward to 2020, and Donald Trump thought he was invincible in his own mind. Because he did not fully grasp that in 2016, more voters had voted against Hillary Clinton than for him, he could not understand that in 2020, the voters were voting against him more than they were voting for Joe Biden. His negatives were also off the charts. And that's a sad commentary on our political system where people are voting against a candidate rather than for somebody. Now we enter the campaign season for 2024, and we have two candidates that are both aging warriors as well as two candidates that have high negatives. The polling data out there shows that neither can get above 50%, and depending on the poll, one has a small lead over the other, and vice versa in another poll, and if you look state to state, it's going to be close. But the real danger for the Republican Party is what Trump does to the down-ballot candidates. Donald Trump has shown that he can generate more Democratic voters to the polls than any other candidate. Most of Trump's supporters tell us that he's a fighter, but they never understand who he's fighting for. Anyone who has watched Donald Trump over the years knows that he's fighting for himself and nobody else. I believe if Donald Trump thought he could get elected to the presidency again as a Democrat, he'd flip parties in a New York minute. Now, if you want to see a good example of a true Republican, I will point you to former GOP Representative Lee Zeldin. Mr. Zeldin lost a competitive race for the New York governor's chair. He could have sat back and licked his wounds, but instead he's heading a political action committee that's raising money to help Republican congressional candidates in New York. It was Mr. Zeldin's strong showing in the race that helped congressional candidates flip 3 seats in New York, and now he wants to help them win again. Now just imagine if Trump had been on the campaign trail last year, had infused several of those close Senate races with some needed cash. Things might be entirely different in the Congress today, and Biden would be totally on the defensive. He would not be able to confirm the liberal judges he sends to the Senate. The famous blue slip would be very relevant. The blue slip's where a home state senator can try to block a judge from his or her home state. Getting back to the debate, Trump's absence will allow the other candidates to offer their platforms and why they should be the nominee. It could boost one of them in the polls and show a weakness for Trump. Republican voters might look at his staying away as a sign of his own ego dictating what should be good for the party. In the end, he's rolling the dice, and some of that is because he knows that someone like Chris Christie would be on the attack on that debate stage, and Trump would have to answer some tough questions. Whereas by sitting down with Tucker Carlson, he'd have none of those kind of questions. The fact is that Trump lives in this world where anything he says should be taken as a gospel truth simply because he said it. Now, tomorrow I'm going to address his most recent claims about Georgia and show some facts that a reasonable person would understand, but in Trump's mind, the facts don't matter. And he continues to say that Georgia election was stolen from him, but all that will be tomorrow. Thanks for listening. If you appreciate it, leave a comment or hit the subscribe button.